What's up, y'all, and welcome back to the Michael Experience Podcast. I am your orator and originator, Michael, and these are my thoughts, my life, my way. So it is a snowy, cold day here in Dallas. And so I think that is so ironic because you would think that in Texas, we wouldn't see things like ice and snow, yet here we are. And so my hope is that, like myself, people are staying safe, warm, and sane because it's a lot going on. So as I'm in the house, as I normally am, I finish working out and I have some polite conversation, as I like to call it, and I get in the shower. And of course, somewhere between here and there, I always end up with some inspiration. And this is where my hard truth for today comes into play. So I was reminded of just my journey in life. So as I'm scrub a dub dubbing in the tub a dub dubbing, uh, I start thinking about my very first job, and I start thinking about my quest for a job back then. And so, without making this too long and going all the way back, I had been into small management positions back when I was a teenager. And so I've always had some type of leadership or management capability. Now, I didn't know what that really meant at the beginning. I just set out to do a job and make some money because I grew up in very humble beginnings and I just wanted to not go without anything. If I'm being honest with you, there was so much happening when I was a child. And I was like, I just never want to struggle again. I never want to go without. I never want to have to wonder where my next this or that was coming from. And so I started working as soon as I could work. Like I delivered the newspaper, I cut grass, I did odd things around people's houses. As soon as I could get a work permit, I got a job. But I want to talk about management and leadership specifically because I feel like there's something there to be unraveled. So, knowing that I had some smaller management leadership roles at the beginning, as I grew into adulthood, I kept saying, I need to be a manager somewhere. I need to be a manager somewhere. And I'm intentionally saying manager right now. So you'll hear me say manager and then leadership because there's a stark contrast. Um, but I kept applying for manager roles as I started getting into adulthood, and I just kept getting decline, decline, decline. And I didn't understand why. I was like, I've done this before. Like, why am I not getting these jobs? It just doesn't make any sense. And then I got a business administration degree. And so I thought for sure that that would make me a shoe in. I was like, I've got some experience and I have a degree. That's going to do it. It didn't do it. And so in this moment, what I'm realizing is that when I look back on the reason why I wanted those jobs, it wasn't because I wanted to teach people anything. It wasn't because I saw myself being at the helm of a team. It wasn't any of those things that you would think a manager or a leader would want to do. I wanted that manager job because I knew that managers made money. And that's what I knew growing up. I was like, somebody's running these establishments and I need to be that person. And I didn't think about all of the responsibility and the leadership responsibilities that came along with it. And so as I moved through my journey and I kept hearing no, 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 I was like, I don't know what's wrong. I started asking myself the question and I started praying about it like, what is going on? Like, why is this happening? And I never really understood, even up until this moment, why I kept getting so many no's. The thing about it is, my mind, my spirit, and my body was just not in alignment. I wasn't doing it for the things that you should, not even a little bit. I just wanted to make some money, regardless if I would be good at it or not. I don't know. Sometimes I was just applying for any job that had manager on it so I could get a paycheck. And that probably wasn't the best way to go about it. I think you should be very intentional. I think that there should be a spiritual, emotional, physical fit within that has to happen for you to go into whatever you do to make it purposeful and meaningful. I, however, wasn't doing that. I was chasing money. I was chasing, or trying to outrun poverty, if I'm being very, very honest. And so I've arrived at this conclusion that sometimes you can have the right idea about the destination, but you could be going in the wrong direction. And the reason why I say that is because today in 2026, I sit as someone who has been a leader at almost every level in an organization outside of like the CEO, CHO, those really high executive suites. I sit before you have served as multiple levels of leadership within an organization and HR for the last decade or so of my career. And I was in positions of leadership. Now, I'm saying leadership now instead of manager or management because I want to make sure that I draw the distinction there. The reason why I gave you the analogy with the directions is because something happened. Something happened around 2014 that caused me to really think about why I wanted to be in leadership. Now, I'm very clear on it now, but even then, up until I still wasn't, but I was like, there's something about me. That's kind of how the question happened. I was like, well, there's something about me, right? There's something about me. And I started being very cognizant of how people were drawn to me. People would just be drawn. I remember working at Macy's my first time working there, and I just got a seasonal job as a second job. And I just wanted to do a good job for my 4 hours, my 4 hour shift, and I wanted to go home. I didn't think about management anymore. I really wasn't interested in that way. But people were seeking me out and saying, have you ever thought about? And in my mind, I was like, I'm not falling for this bait because I've applied for management jobs for the last, I don't know, umpteen years, it felt like. And I was like, it's just never happened. It just has never happened. So I was like, I'm not falling for that. But what I noticed is that people started gravitating to me for leadership. And I learned that leadership isn't always about a title, it is about the action, it is about the interaction. And so it had gotten to a point where people were coming to me like, hey, how do I do this? Or how do I merchandise this? Or, hey, I wanted to know, I wasn't here the other day. And I'm like, I work 4 hours. I work 4 hours here. Like, who told you to come over here and ask me that? Surely there's a manager, supervisor, team lead, or something that you can ask about this. But instead, people were flocking to me to figure out certain things. And I was like, and so, as various leaders, because I worked all throughout the store, because I was a flex associate for the holiday, and I would just work anywhere in the store, and people noticed, I guess, my impact or my footprint when I would leave. There was just certain way that I organized things. Things happening. You could check sales and all the things like that, and so people just noticed like different things, and also. I was helping people really I was really helping people with ensembles in some of those areas that I was in. And so I didn't realize that people would be coming back and asking for the guy that helped them, style their weekend or something like that. So interestingly enough, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, yeah, maybe if I stay here after that, I might, want to move into leadership. But at the core of me, I was thinking like, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not about to do the bait on the hook thing because I've tried this before and for whatever reason it's not worked. And I had applied for Macy several times, and I'd never gotten called back for a leadership position or management position. So I was like, whatever. So, anywho, I never ended up, at least at that point, working in a leadership position with them. But when I left there, I just had so many questions about my life. I was like, I have this degree, and I'm praying. I'm like, I have this degree, Lord. I have this knack for business. And I don't really know what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing because I've applied to everything and it's just not working. And on a chance, or a whim, should I say, I had two friends that lived in Dallas, Texas, and they invited me out, and I probably wasn't gonna go. Like I really wasn't gonna go. Like these two friends, I love them to pieces, but I just didn't see myself going to Texas. I was like, to go to Texas. Ugh. And so, and now I say that, and now this is my second time living here, but I just didn't see Texas in my purview. If I went somewhere else, I thought it would be, especially to live, but even visit at the time, it would have been California for some reason. And so, I come to Dallas for a week and a half, 2 weeks. I can't remember the time exactly, but I remember coming and I had a wonderful time while I was here. I was embraced. The city lights, amazing cityscape, just amazing. And so I remember just a few days before I was going home, my friend was like, "Hey, you ever think about moving here?" And I was like, "No, I didn't even think about coming here to visit y'all, and I wasn't gonna come, but I moved back to my mom's house and I kind of wanted to get away, you know. I kind of wanted to get away." He's like, "So why don't you think about moving here?" And I was like, He's like, "I can get you a job." And I was like, "Give me a job doing what?" Now, I didn't really think about what his career was at the time. I knew he was like a district manager, but I didn't really think about it or whatever. And he worked in the hospitality industry, and so I really didn't think anything about it. I was like, I don't know. Like, what would I do there? That just doesn't even seem like me. And so he was like, "Send me your resume." And so over the next few days, he kept saying, you never sent it to me." So I was like, okay. So I slept on it a couple of nights and then I ended up sending in my resume like a day, or I think it was the day before I was gonna leave. And so I was like, okay, let me just send it to him or whatever. I'm not excited about the opportunity or anything like that. And so I get on the plane and I go home and I have a voicemail on my phone from his boss saying that they were interested in offering me the job. And I was like, "Are you kidding?" And I found out when I got off the plane. Like I literally touched on off the plane, so I had a voicemail, listen to it, and I was like, "This is serious. Let me call my friend." I was like, "Hey, your boss reached out to me. Like, you guys are really wanting to offer me the job." And so he's like, "Yeah, I told you so." I was like, "Wow." So I made a decision. I think I went home and I just kind of was like milling it over. I had prayed, I had, done all the things, huffed and puffed, and all the things when you get deflated. And I knew I wasn't going to be working at Macy's because it was seasonal. And then I had a night job as a CNA. Uh-huh. And so I was like, okay, like, what can you do, Michael? Like, what can you do? You said you wanted to move. Cali may have been an option, but this is the option that is in front of you. And it seems like the more likely thing. You know people, and it's somewhere you've never really been. So, all right, maybe we take a chance and go to Texas. And so I told my friend yes. I went back to work, put in my 2 weeks notice, and top of the year it is. And I'm on my way in my car with all my belongings. Now, let me tell you about the job. The job was a housekeeping manager job. A housekeeping manager. I can't remember what the verbiage was for it at the time. But it ended up being a housekeeping manager. Let's call it what it is. These titles get very, very dignified, but it was a housekeeping manager job. And I was like, oh my God, I'm taking this job and it doesn't pay a whole bunch of money. I was like, but it is still a management. So we're back to management. I was like, it's still a management job and it still gives me some relevant experience in management because I haven't had any in a long time. All I've had is these smaller boutique as kind of companies and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, let me just take this and, I'll just figure out how to make it work for me on my resume. And so I took the job and I did the job for about a year and a half. And of course, it was a dirty job. But in that position, I became just a huge resource for people to the point where I started noticing again that people were coming to me for different things. And so there was a role that I wanted that I thought would align better with my personality. And it was called the district training manager. It would be the person that would usher new managers into their jobs within this company. And so I was like, yeah, I need that job. And so my friend knew, he was like, I figured. And so the plan was that the lady would, eventually move out of the role and then I would move into it. And so that's what we were planning. So succession planning. And, but I started working with her just on like some odd projects and stuff like that because I didn't really have a space of my own at first. And so I kind of just went site to site with her and we did things or whatnot. But then something happened. She started putting a lot off on me. And then when problems were happening, she would consult me about the problems and look to me to fix them. And what I noticed is that at first I was like, is this lady using me? But then I realized that she just did not know. And the way that I had come in with all of my confidence and my know how and very compliance, like, this should not be like this. I remember going to her office. I was like, this should not be like this. And so I was going in and I was just naturally and organically fixing things. And, after a while, people were like, hey, can I talk to you about this issue, that issue, that issue? And I'm like, well, hold on. Why are we having these issues? And so as I'm moving about, I learned that there are multiple locations that are having some of the similar issues. And I'm like, what are we doing about this? Like, what are we doing about this? My natural curiosity and my problem solving knack or quest started getting the best of me yet again. And so here I am problem solving and I'm coming up with, solutions and well, maybe we should try this. And, if that didn't work, maybe this will. And that's what it was what happened. And so I started noticing like that people in the market were reaching out to me for a ton of things. And when we would have the training sessions with, my peers and, the DM, which was my friend and the district training manager, that people were looking to me to add value to these meetings. And I was like, oh, wow. And it's like, yeah, Michael, I know you have something. And then I would be like, oh, okay. So I'm just going to be on here. And so I started doing some form of presentation in that aspect. And people were just begin to call me like, hey, Michael, I just wanted to call and ask about this. And I was like, this is just the most precarious thing, the most precarious thing. But what was happening was that my mind had began shifting from looking at manager jobs back to manager for money. And it really started me on this question of leadership. And it truly became about the work instead of the money. And so I was like, okay, like I am noticing that I do come alive as I'm doing this. And it seems very, very innate to me to do this. And so I'm like, okay. Now, of course, there's parts of the job that I don't like. It's a dirty job. But I'm realizing that there's something about this fixing things and people coming to me as a resource. And I'm like, okay. And so I stay with that organization and I'm like, okay, well, there's too much going on here for me and it's not making sense. And so I leave. And when I leave, I go back to looking for manager jobs. So again, the wheels were starting to turn in it, but I hadn't quite clicked into the leadership and the being a resource to people. I hadn't clicked right into it yet. I hadn't clicked into it. And so I was applying for jobs. Nobody was answering. Nobody was, whatever. Nobody. I was getting nowhere. And I remember one night. This was 2015, and I got so upset. Like I attended to it. I was like, God, like I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be taking care of, people in a nursing home and stuff. I don't want to keep doing this. Like I know I'm meant to do more. You know what I mean? Like I liked helping people, but my God, I was like, this is just not fulfilling. I know I can do more. Like, what am I missing? What am I missing? And so I spent many a nights like just trying to work through, just mental things that I was like, okay, let me just work on my finances. Let me get better at that. Let me get better at like things in my house. And I just started like pouring into like myself in that way, trying to enrich myself in any way that I could. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just not meant for me and maybe it's just not my time. I don't know. And I just remember having this thought of a lady named Michelle. Her name was Michelle Root, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember as I was working at a nursing facility, and it was called HCR Manor Care at the time. And, I remember meeting her, and she was the HR person there. And I remember meeting her, and I remember being so kind of captivated by the work that she was doing. And it left a question in me. It was like, what if this is the job? And so as I'm having this breakdown of a moment, I literally have this vision of Michelle Root at the job in at HR Care, and me sitting there wondering like, oh my god, this is the actual job. Like, she's literally going through policies and stuff like this, and she's literally, you know, shaping people's careers or bringing people into their careers. And so I always had that image and that question in my mind. Now, it wasn't a burning question, but it was like a one that would reoccur every now and again. And so in this moment that I needed clarity or I needed something, it came back to me how all of my memories do, very videographic, very auditory. It came back to me. And I said, Michael, what if you weren't meant to just be a manager somewhere? What if you were meant to do something different? What about that human resource thing that you saw? Now, I honestly didn't know how vast or how broad the human resources world was then. I didn't know all the variations, generalist, and I didn't know it was broken down into benefits, workforce, all of these things that I know now after being there. I didn't know anything about that. I was like, okay, like HR is HR is in my mind. And so I started applying for HR jobs, just whatever I saw, not knowing the difference. And then that wasn't working. And I said, well, I had this idea. I had this idea. It's not working. What am I missing? And then something said to me, don't be afraid to start over. And that kind of loomed in my mind. I was like, don't be afraid to start over. Now, wait a minute. Now, I never want to go back to where I came from. And starting over means, that I'm probably going to have to start off with a very low pay and I'm going to be back at the bottom of the totem pole and all those things. And so I was like, I'm not doing that. But then it came to me again and was like, don't be afraid to start over. Now, this is where God comes in because when things are really heavy like that and when those things really just keep eating, and I was like, okay, don't be afraid to start over. Faith the size of a mustard seed. I feel it in my gut, and I always say when I feel it in my gut or if I feel like I'm super afraid of it, instead of running away, I need to lean in and see why, because the only way to conquer fear is to get over it and go through it. So I was like, okay, don't be afraid to start over. Got it. So in my mind, I was like, I'm starting from ground zero with no money because that's been a motivation of mine. I didn't think of it as kind of a rebirth where I am entering in a new mindset. I'm entering into a new environment. I didn't think of it in those terms. I didn't think of it as like a rebirth, a regeneration, which is where I would really should have been looking because newness and growth are like the cornerstones of success, I believe. And so I said, okay, let's go deeper with this ground zero thing. And I said, so ground zero, okay, it's not about the money. Okay, let's move away from that because if we get caught up on that, we will never move forward. And I said, well, I guess it would mean also that instead of looking at manager jobs, maybe I should be looking at the ones that get me in the door and maybe they're not obvious. And so that's what I did. So I took some time and I figured it out and I said, okay, these admin roles, surely these are transferable skills and this will get you to where you need to go at some point. And so that is when I found administrative support team at Macy's. And so a company that I had applied for a million times, worked for just a slight bit for the holiday at one point. And I was like, okay, back here at Macy's. So I applied to a handful of them. And I think I talked about some of this in a different episode or another, but I applied to every one of them and I didn't get anything back. And then randomly one day I got a phone call, a voicemail from a Janice Foster. I got a voicemail from Janice Foster. Shout out to Janice if you're listening to my podcast for starting my HR career. Um, But I got a phone call from her. Now, I didn't apply to the location she was at, so I surely did not I did not understand like the situation. I was like, did I apply? And I go back on the portal, I look, I had not applied to this one, but for some reason, my application ended up in her system some kind of a way. So I'm like, okay. And so we get things set up. I do the interview instantly with her, felt something, and I began working there. And it wasn't even a full time role, but I began working there. That position, which was like a flex position that nobody should have seen me really in. Nobody should have noticed my skill. Nobody should have come asking for me or about me. But that position ended up catapulting me into like my eh, just I don't know, meteoric, rise in leadership. So what happened is people began seeing my work and recognizing it for what it was. And then people automatically wanted me in positions of leadership. Now, I say leadership now because it was becoming a little bit clearer that people needed me and my role was a human resource role. I mean, in some form or another. So I was to be a resource. That's what I was there for. So, of course, but when people were asking me, "Have you ever thought about leadership? Have you ever thought about leadership? Have you ever thought about leadership?" And I was like, "Yeah, I thought about being a manager." So the reason why I keep going back and forth is because it took me a while to shift to the leadership mindset. It took me a while, but I ended up getting there. And so after a while, I just kept getting people asking, asking, asking. And what shifted and made it make sense for me was there was a woman by the name of Michelle Patterson. So, yeah, Michelle Patterson. And Michelle really changed kind of, I guess, the trajectory through the way that she inspired me with her story. So, Michelle Patterson is a very God fearing, God loving woman and very, very minimalist in a lot of ways. You would never think that this woman ever had like a big social booming life. You would never think so meeting her. She just seems so humble. Um, she's authoritative in when she says things because the woman is educated and definitely knowledgeable, but just the way that she moved through the world in humility and understanding and kindness, you would not think that this woman had lived, but true enough, she had. And I remember seeing her all the time. She'd be running around and she'd be moving quick and she'd be doing her thing. And so, as I was positioning myself mentally for something different, and I knew that something was coming, just didn't know quite what. She just was there, and so we had a conversation one day, and she was like, she told me that she believed in God, and I know that's always I'm always very cautious about talking about God and religion and spiritual things with people because not a lot of people can understand deference and difference between what their beliefs are and sometimes yours. But she was like, do you believe in God? And I was like, of course. But she said, okay, because I wanted to make sure so this could make sense to you. And so she sat me down and told me a story about how she was like this high level marketing VP and that she was living the life, going to the parties in New York. Going to the parties in New York, had the finest of the fine, had the apartment, had the life, just did all of the things. And she said one day God humbled me and he took it all away from me. And I was so arrogant for a long time and entitled. And I kept thinking, like, I'm going to get it back because it's owed to me. And she said, and when he didn't give it back to me, I had no choice but to submit. I had no choice but to submit. And so I'm giving you guys the shortened paraphrase version of it. But she said, so when people wonder why I'm here in an hourly role as a team lead when I have been a VP elsewhere, is because it's not about those material things anymore. It's not. It's about what makes me happy. It's about doing the work. And this was the statement for me that really hit home. She said, "And I'm not title struck. And I'm not title struck." That was the thing that stuck with me. I mean, her story in general, but that was the thing that just stuck out like a sore thumb. I was like, not title struck. And so as I was thinking about my journey walking away from that, it really flipped everything on its axis. And it was like, Michael, you have been running after a title and you've been running after it because of the money, when really the title doesn't even matter. It should really be about the work. It should really be about the work. So, how comfortable are you and how confident are you in your ability to do what you're doing, regardless what the title on the door is, and the need for money? I take us back to what I said earlier. Sometimes we can have the right idea about the destination, but we could be going in the wrong direction. I was meant to be a leader, not a manager, right? And I know sometimes we say both, but there is a stark contrast between the two, but the seats look the same. And, you can really confuse the two, right? I was meant to be a leader. I was meant to be a leader, not a manager. So I had been going about it the absolute wrong way the whole time, and also thinking of leaderships in terms of a title and not really the action. I hadn't connected those things, but I did, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to be title struck. That's where it began. I said, I'm not going to be title struck. It's going to be about the work. Whatever I do from here on out is about the work. And I think it is no mistake that she was where she was and that she had that conversation with me. I needed that. She had probably had that conversation a million other times with people because she seemed eager to share, her story and her testimony. But I needed that from her to change something in me. And so that's how I moved throughout the duration of my career. Now, mind you, this was in 2015. I want to say this conversation was 2015, 2016 when this happened. And early 2017 is when my promotions started taking place. I had two in the same year, one after the first 3 months. I went from supervisor to manager in 3 months. And then I turned around, flipped that position into another one, retained my salary, but in an hourly role. But again, it was about the work and not the title. And so people often wonder, like, Michael, you went from a salary role to an hourly role. And like that makes no sense in this world. And I would always say, I'm not title struck and it is not about the money, it's about the work. And so I did it. Most people didn't know I retained my same amount just in an hourly rate. So I was kind of winning anyway, but it became about the work. It truly became about the work and where I feel I was best positioned to do the work. And that role really catapulted me through the rest of my journey. Any role that I had taken after that, I kept the same core principle in mind. Michael, we are not doing this for the money. Yeah, we have to make a living, but we're doing it for the work. And it became for me and God a conversation of, Lord, what is my assignment? What is my assignment in this? What is it that I'm meant to do here? And when I am done, I move on. And the important thing about that is I see people stay in roles and stay at companies far beyond what I think their end date should be. And those are the people that are very evil, seeming very evil. They're very snide. They seem uncomforting. They seem just like they are disengaged, right? But they sit in these positions. And so, what I said about myself is that I would never stay in a position longer than I was supposed to. And so that was me always saying, like, Lord, what is next? What is my assignment here, so that I'm clear about why I'm doing it and I stay doing it. And I've been that way ever since. So when I think about, my career elevation, which was steady, I mean steady even up until this point in my life, right? I feel like my next assignment has revealed itself. I do believe it firmly. It's just a feeling I get. And I will be at the next level of that very, very soon. And I thank God for that. But it was never about the title. And as I move into this new role, it's not even about the title. The title will help on my resume for something or another. I don't know. All of it in the big scheme of things, the big picture that I don't see that God, the universe has in store. I don't know. It will make sense at some point to me. But what I am very clear about is the work. And when people ask me today, Michael, why do you do what you do? Or Michael, why would you want to do this? And I said, and I always say, um, it is to create impact and to have fun along the way. What I realized about me is that whether I wanted to or not, I was always going to be a leader. Whether that was the title that I gave it or somebody else gave to me, I was always going to do it because people were always drawn to me. I say this a lot and I keep telling myself I'm going to have to refrain from saying it, but I think it's good for storytelling. I tell people if I had it my way, I would be one of those people, something like an agoraphobic, that I would never leave my house. I would do my work from home. I would have everything delivered to me, and I would just feel perfectly protected and insulated in my home, and I would never have to deal with people. And it's not because I hate people, but I really do like the solitude, and it's much more calmer for a person like me who is very empathic in a lot of ways, and I can get overstimulated in crowds of people. However, there is something that comes to life in me when I see, sense, and feel that what I'm giving to the world is making an impact. When people are saying, Michael, you're the reason why I decided to become a leader, or Michael, you're the reason why I decided to be my authentic self. And Michael, just seeing you as a possibility model, I now understand that as a person that is part of the LGBTQ, I can be a senior leader too, and I can be poised and I can be regal. And it's just all of these things that people are giving back to me, to affirm me. I'm like, this is what I was meant to do, and why would I sit on this? The listen here, my purpose is much greater than anything that I could imagine or do for myself. And the feeling that I get when I know that it's helping is just monumental. And it really, really is beyond the money. Right? Like I have to make a living, of course, and I tell people that all the time. Now I have to make a living, so please don't mistake that I'm just out here saying, I'm gonna do all of this for free. Well, I gotta live in some kind of a way, but I am committed to not taking any more than I need, right? Or what is, what I'm doing is valued at. I'm not gonna do that. And as I move through my journey, yeah, I have goals. I have things that I'm thinking about. I do. And everything relative to that in this world, of course, I know it takes money to make money. It takes things and stuff like that. But the work is much more important to me. And so as we sit here in 2026 and I'm in this shower, I'm not in the shower now, but as I was in the shower, this all of this came full circle to me about management and leadership and how I chased being a manager for the money instead of followed my natural intuition and my natural knack for being a leader. So, the hard truth is that I had to look at myself. I had to look at myself and challenge why I was doing what I was doing. And what would it mean if I looked at it differently? What if I looked at it from the lens of fulfilling a need at large instead of fulfilling my own, to never be broke again or never to want again or never to be impoverished again? What if being of service to others was greater than my service, solely to myself? What if? What if? So I implore you, if you are chasing something. You are chasing it. And you're like, why is it not happening? Why does it seem like it's almost there? Or it seems like it almost makes sense, but I'm not quite getting there. I want you to go back to what I said earlier. Sometimes you can have the right idea about the destination, but you may just be going in the wrong direction. So I would challenge you to look at your direction. Look at your direction. See how you can flip your mindset. See how you can go within. See how if you are doing it from a place of self, me, I, if you flip that into how you can be of service, what difference would that make in the direction you go in? Because what I will say for me is I would have walked into any manager position if they had hired me, and I probably would have did it to the best of my abilities and then quit. And then I would have done it again and then I would have quit. And I would have done it again and I would have quit. I wouldn't have cared if the results were great. I wouldn't have cared if people were, satiated in their development journey. I wouldn't have cared about anything regarding anyone else other than I needed to make my money. But when I flipped it to a service mindset, the fulfillment that I got from being able to help someone realize what their possibility is in helping people really achieve their dreams and changing people's lives in terms of the their families, right? Their livelihood for their families, and planting seeds for other people that will grow and nurture other young leaders. And hopefully I have touched them in such a way that they do it with care, extreme veracity, and just a willingness to help someone along their journey. My hope is that we all find that kind of peace and that kind of fulfillment so that we're not looking at the money as the primary reason, and we're not staying seated in a place just because we know we can, but that we are actually focused on the work and the assignment each and every time. So, as I move into this new journey of mine, I'm very, very excited about all of the people that I will get to touch, whether it is the people that are just listening to my voice on this podcast, whether it's the people that as I move through my corporate journey, I get to help build their careers and reshape and reframe their mindsets around how to deal with people and lead people and not just manage. I think in the climate we're in, there's such a need, and there's going to continue to be a need for servant leadership, and those of us to use whatever gifts that we have to be of service to ourselves for sure, but others as well, and find joy and fulfillment and make your money, right? Because we need it to live. And you be able to make your money adequately from it. My hope is that we all get to that level. And I hope that I get to do more of that from here until I'm done. So, wherever you're listening to me, your car, your house, school, playground, outside somewhere, wherever you're listening to me, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be a small part in your journey. And my hope is that when you are done listening to this episode or any other episode, that you walk away from it realizing that you too have an impact. You too have an impact to make. And it starts with challenging those self and those I's and those me's and getting to the bottom of what really makes you feel good about what you do. And then how that can be represented in what you do for others. Because you have something, we all do. And again, like I said, sometimes we have the right idea about the destination, but we're just going the wrong direction. So You can turn around right now anytime you decide and start working on a new direction. I promise you will get to exactly where you are meant to be. So, this has been my hard truth, a hard truth that I had to sit with and work through for years before I got it. So, if it doesn't happen for you today, that's okay. Just take it day by day, moment by moment, but keep asking yourself and keep challenging yourself. This has been the Michael Experience Podcast. I thank you all for the time. As I say, go out there and love on yourself before you love on somebody else, okay? Peace and love, y'all. Bye.